The Ford Pinto, a car that needs little introduction. I generally focus on the positive aspects of these cars of our childhood, so the Pinto has not been high on the list of topics, for obvious reasons. And though this story has been determined to be more nuanced and complicated over the years, one must always remember the victims and the positive change brought forth as a result of their tragic loss. One thing is for sure, there were many factors that contributed to this infamous story. From questionable industry-wide cost analysis studies that balanced profits with safety, to confusing and ever-changing government regulations, times were different. In reality, most studies have since found that Pinto was no more or less dangerous in terms of overall loss of life than its contemporary counterparts. As with anything in life, from amusement park tragedies to just walking down the street, bad things happen, and it is what we learn from these events that determines their final impact on us all. It is also true there are multiple realities to the Pinto story. While some are tragic, many will have fond memories of loved ones that drove these little cars. We remember the lost. We remember our personal history with these cars. We remember the many hardworking people that built these cars. The everyday people that were just trying to work and feed their families. Indeed, it was not the fault of any of these people, or even the Pinto itself, that led to this tale. The Ford Pinto tale. The dawn of the 1970s ushered in a dramatically new era for both cars and culture. Even before the first energy crisis, demand was quickly growing for more sensible, economical cars. The youth were already increasingly less interested in the giant barges most American makers would build to the very close of the decade. The counterculture was rebelling against the establishment, and their voices were taken seriously once the import offerings started taking considerable market share. Early design objectives called for a car that weighed less than 2,000 pounds and cost $2,000. Ford scrambled a development program that was the most ambitious in automotive history, to develop a completely new car in only 25 months. It is unclear how this short development cycle contributed to the Pinto story, but Ford might have reconsidered had there been a magical opera window that could foretell the future. Approved by Ford's board of directors in January 1969, Pinto was somewhat ironically introduced on September 11, 1970, under the tagline, "The Little Carefree Car." The initial ads focused on how easy Pinto was to own, with extended oil change intervals, reduced frequency of chassis lubrication, and other areas where maintenance was reduced compared to prior offerings. And of course, there was an emphasis on fuel economy. Some of that fuel economy was achieved with standard practices of the day, such as early bumper systems that were little more than decoration so as to keep them as lightweight as possible. Unibody construction and lightweight four-cylinder engines also kept weight to a minimum. The Pinto styling was radical for the time and was penned by Robert Aitchen. The trim dimensions and overall shape aided in fuel savings, but some could not get past the unusual rear profile. Many, however, would immediately embrace the Ford Pinto, including Henry Ford II, who ordered one for his personal use. In addition to efficiency and ease of maintenance, Ford also went to enormous lengths to convince the more traditionally minded consumers that downsizing to a Pinto would not be the penalty that they perceived. A big concern of downsizing from a large heavy car to a car weighing half as much was the fear of a loss of road stability. So Ford demonstrated the Pinto traversing hurricane-strength crosswinds and rough roads. There was also some focus on the steering and suspension setup. The steering unit was rack and pinion, and truly did offer greater stability at both low and high speeds, as well as better road feel. The front suspension featured unequal length control arms with coil springs, while leaf springs suspended the live rear axle. Pinto was also wide compared to its overall footprint. Though 20 inches shorter than its Falcon stablemate, Pinto was only 3 inches narrower than Falcon. These efforts paid off, and Ford's newest pint-sized pony was out of the gate and on its way to sales victory. The first Pintos went on sale September 11, 1970, with only one body style, the fastback sedan with enclosed trunk. It is reported that structural issues prevented the more desirable hatchback body style from being offered at introduction. Those issues were apparently overcome, and the hatchback would premiere at the 1971 Chicago Auto Show. Ford christened the hatchback body style as Runabout. Ads focused on handling and comfort features such as a turning diameter that was over 3 feet shorter than foreign competitors and an interior that was comparable in size to much larger cars. Exterior decor packages would appear and remain popular for the life of the Pinto. Most packages were primarily superficial, partially in an effort to save weight and cost. Themes ranged from sporty rally-style offerings to luxury decor packages complete with vinyl padded roofs. Power came in the form of 2 4-cylinder offerings ranging from 75 to 100 horsepower for 1971. Ford hedged its bets in these early brochures by including the Maverick and describing it as all the value of Pinto, and then some. Ford need not have worried, however. Pinto was a runaway hit. While some reviews were mixed, most of the press and public was impressed with this first subcompact offering from Ford. One of the common sources of praise was an interior that was better finished than most rivals. In place of the acres of black vinyl common in the day, Pinto featured colorful interiors that were trimmed in a variety of cloth and vinyl materials. Exterior fit and finish was also praised by some, though quality did seem to differ, probably depending on the day of the week an example was built. Every so often, something occurs that changes the course of history. This certainly applies to the car industry. Long before Pinto, there was a car that, against all odds, helped shape the destiny of every small car to come after it. Though ancient by the early 70s, its message still resonated loud and clear. Infinitely practical and unabashedly different. The Volkswagen Beetle's debut and success over the coming decades was something the American automobile industry could not decipher. While American cars of the 50s and 60s grew ever larger and more chrome-laden, there was a quiet but unmistakable expansion in the small car universe. The American car makers took notice of this phenomenon and produced downsized offerings in the compact segment. These efforts were followed up by plans to introduce even smaller subcompact offerings that would do battle directly with foreign imports. AMC's Gremlin would beat Pinto to market by only a few months. AMC accomplished this feat by essentially removing the tail end from a Hornet, a perfect example of AMC's typical brilliant use of minimal resources. While somewhat successful, the visual compromise it resulted was seen as quirky by many, and downright ugly by others. Probably the reason AMC christened it Gremlin in the first place. With Pinto, Ford designers started with nothing. Transmission, engine, and other non-negotiable dimensions were determined, and the unibody was developed to be as lightweight and efficient as possible. The initial base engine was Ford's 75 horsepower Kent Inline 4, while the optional EAO Inline 4 served an additional 25 horsepower. These power ratings would vary slightly from year to year. Rack and pinion steering was used in place of the more typical recirculating ball setup in an effort to deliver improved road holding and crosswind resistance. As was standard for the time, an inline configuration with conventional live rear axle was used to keep costs to a minimum. A downside to this configuration is more weight and less interior space, which is why most cars were transitioning to transverse front-wheel drive configurations. Most prospects found interior space adequate and the compromise acceptable, if it meant a lower overall cost of ownership. For its second year, Pinto received a surprising number of changes, the most notable being the addition of a two-door station wagon. The three-door runabout and two-door sedans would also continue. The luxury decor interior packages added surprising levels of luxury, rarely seen in a small car at this time. Base models could be upgraded with accent group packages that added exterior brightwork in place of plain painted metal. Many interiors featured full vinyl seating surfaces, which were not ideal during hot summer days, so the addition of an improved ventilation system was probably most welcome. Color offerings were numerous, as was usually the case of this bygone era. The luxury decor package featured here also offered flip-out rear quarter windows to help keep things cool. And as always, numerous options were available, so every Pinto was unlike any other in the stable. Despite a continued focus on safety features in the ads, there were some dark clouds on the horizon. By the end of 1972, Pinto had already suffered 2 recalls, the first related to sticking throttle cables, and the second to correct an issue that could potentially cause an engine fire. Behind the scenes, Ford was starting to become aware Pinto had some gremlins of its own. Despite continued strong sales resulting from an ever-increasing range of configurations and options, the first signs of something ominous were becoming apparent. Ford would stay the course externally, while internally, the severity of Pinto's troubles was assessed. New two-tone options and refinements, such as a gas strut to replace the previous scissor liftgate support, would only further the tiny pony's popularity. Despite only 2 doors, the station wagon variants had proven surprisingly successful, particularly as seen in this fetching shade of pea green. A manual sunroof and racing-style mirrors were on offer, as was glamorous metallic glow paint. Ford continued to talk safety, focusing mostly on frontal impact concerns, such as impact-absorbing steering columns and a glare-reduced instrument panel. From the basic 2-door sedan to the relatively glamorous Pinto Squire wagon, Pinto showed no signs of slowing down. Things were seemingly business as usual in 1974 for Pinto. New 5-mile-per-hour bumpers mandated by federal regulations appeared front and rear, and the optional overhead Cam 4 was expanded to 2.3 liters to address complaints of the lack of power. There was some brochure space dedicated to assuring potential buyers that Ford's goal was no unhappy owners. Efforts were made to convince that the Pinto was built to high-quality standards. The 3 body styles remained. Standard brakes were manual, but did feature front discs. A security system and steel-belted radios were also available. Ease of maintenance continued to be a selling point, with 36,000 miles between chassis lubrication and 6,000 miles between oil changes. Sales were better than ever, exceeding 544,000. Though Pinto sold in far greater numbers, there was a Lincoln Mercury variant, christened Bobcat. Bobcat arrived in Canada exclusively for 1974 and was available in America from 1975 through 1980. As was tradition for the time for rebadged variants, changes were minimal but notable. Initially, Bobcat featured a more distinct chrome egg crate grille and minor interior trim upgrades. Fortunately, Bobcat received more love soon after its introduction, with a more sculpted hood and formal chrome waterfall grille. Mercury script and expensive-to-produce individual lettering adorned the area above the stately grille. Bobcat was only available in 3-door and wagon trim, and featured upgraded interior materials and finishings, befitting a Lincoln Mercury offering. Taillights would seem to have foreshadowed the family truckster, with the standard Pinto units duplicated in mirror form. Deluxe interior options in Alpine or Kristen cloth with vinyl were available in a variety of vibrant colors. An S option group offered blacked out trim for a sporty appearance. A mini console and special bucket seats were also available to offer that special blend of sport and luxury. It was full speed ahead for 1975, as Pinto received its first V6. Though this 2.8-liter was considerably down on power compared to Gremlin's 3.8-liter, it was at least something GM's Vega could not offer. And at this point, Pinto needed all the help it could get, as concerns grew over safety. An ever-expanding range of colors and detailing did continue to appeal to many, however. Air conditioning, AM/FM stereo, power steering, and the cruise-o-matic transmission were increasingly popular options as buyers expected more from even the most basic of automobiles. Pinto received the previous Canada-only Bobcat grille for 1976, as well as a Runabout Squire option that featured the wood grain exterior applique that had previously only been available in wagon form. The two-door sedan variant continued on as Pinto's lowest price offering and featured standard vinyl trim. Wagon models continued to feature a load floor nearly 6 foot long with the rear seats folded, and over 57 cubic foot of storage overall. Decor packages also continued, as did an updated range of two-tone color combinations. The Stallion Group option was a 1-year-only offering that featured special Stallion insignias on the fenders, as well as a number of blacked-out trim components. A new, more complicated front end appeared for 1977, featuring a smaller chrome grille and inboard turn signals. This was one of many changes Pinto underwent in its final years. Though the cynical would say this was a large corporation's attempt to keep up profits, as a child of the 80s who was always fascinated with the underdog cars, I prefer to imagine these numerous changes as Pinto's way of trying to survive. Like many children of the 80s, I remember wishing I could be as cool as Jack Tripper, cruising in a Pinto wagon along Santa Monica Boulevard. I remember my aunt owning a Bobcat with butterscotch-colored interior. I remember the horror on my mom's face when Dad pulled up to the house in a well-worn pea-green Squire wagon that had apparently been painted with a broom. Through good times and bad, flawed as we and these cars were and are, the memories are priceless. Pinto would receive a final significant change for 1979 with the front end made to resemble the Fairmont. This was no doubt an effort to associate Pinto with its highly successful Fairmont sibling. Options ranged from bare-bones transportation to luxury offerings and anything in between. The cruising wagon with the bubble rear window and vast array of graphics was hotter than ever. The ESS option, which was found on other Ford offerings as well, blacked out a majority of exterior whitework for what Ford described as a European look. Traditional two-tone offerings were toned down in favor of a greatly increased range of multicolored tape and stripe options. Even the basic two-door sedan model could be fitted with upgraded wheels and appearance accoutrements. And the wagon wasn't left behind either, with the availability of sporty black louvers. Pinto is an important story that should never be forgotten. Most of all, we should remember the human aspect. It was the hardworking people that actually built Pinto. They performed the job they were asked to do so they could provide for their families. And many, no doubt, felt a sense of quality in the product they worked hard to produce. Sometimes the very people and the cars they built are impacted by outside forces they could not have foreseen until it was too late. For its final year, Pinto would provide one of the widest number of variants in the industry, almost as if a last attempt to remain relevant. While taillight detailing and other minor revisions were made, the V6 was dropped to cut cost. Despite the loss of its V6, Pinto would put on a brave face with a rally pack that featured special graphics and a bespoke rear spoiler. Having served since 1971, Pinto would now bow out to make room for Escort, but that's a story for another time. As a great comedian once said, we turn our tragedy into comedy. This is how we conquer our darkest times. And that is the story of the Ford Pinto. Please like and subscribe if you enjoyed, and thank you for watching. I sincerely appreciate it.
What it's like to be at the top. Go all electric, watch your models drop. Shift into second, and soon will be experience all triviality. Come on, you gotta go in the back of my mom's Pinto. Drive a Jeep, remember the war. Need a couch, what are land yachts for? Faster than a trucker, quick as a nail. Let's all listen to Topper's Cartel.